Don't forget, we got a huge weekend of live TV, state volleyball at the Dome, and of course we'll be with you for the regular season finale of Bison football. Join us for Bison Game Day inside the Dakota Dome at 10 a.m. live on WDAY, and then we hit the air at 12:50 for the game at 1 between NDSU and USD. Our next guest would normally be there, but he's got other plans this weekend, so I don't know if he'll have to watch the Midco version. I'm sorry about that's the. You can make that happen, Matt Larsen, can't you? You can't watch the WDAY. Well, you can on your phone, I guess, if you wanted to do that. But you're going to have about 8 screens going on Saturday.
We are, and that's actually one of the fun parts about being in Indy and being on the committee. It's tough being away from a game and not being there in person. But yeah, when you have 10 screens going, and there's a lot of, as we look at this year, and it's almost been every year, you're going into this weekend with about a dozen games that are going to impact either seeding, bracketing, who gets in. And so that's what's fun is you're watching it live and then trying to populate. And so it's fun. People can control their own destiny, and sometimes it works out for them. Sometimes it doesn't.
I know you'll be following my bracketology I'm posting here after we're done. So I know you look at that and take notes. But for people that missed our last time we chatted was right after the selection of the first reveal in October. To now have 16 seeds, does that make it easier to bracket out?
I would say it's a little more difficult because you are adding 8 more, where before it was you would do your 8 and then basically the software kind of populates everything. We'd massage it a little bit, but now we truly are seeding 16. Yeah. So it's more difficult from that standpoint is, after 8, it still matters, for those next 8 that we're going to seed. So yeah, I would say it's definitely going to be more challenging, but at the end of the day, it's going to positively benefit the tournament. So all worth it.
I know each committee member brings something different to the table in terms of what they value. I'll ask for you personally, where does head-to-head rank for you?
Yeah, that's it kind of depends. I think if all things are equal, head-to-head should win out. If, we've had years in the past where maybe the head-to-head was early on in the season, and then you compare the 2 resumes, and one school has a much stronger resume than the other. And it could have been maybe just one off game or whatever it is. So I would say it's not absolute that a head-to-head means that team should be in the bracket, the other or ranked ahead. It really depends on what the rest of it looks like. You could have a team that loses to somebody, but then is, beat 3 top 10 teams. How do you value those out? So right. It kind of depends. To say we're going to look at one thing in isolation is hard. So but I would say if all things are equal, resumes look very similar to me, then head-to-head has to matter.
Because that comes right home to you here, because obviously North Dakota State and South Dakota, this is a massive game here. Mm-hmm. And I would posit that, okay, if USD were to win the game, but it's a close game, like overtime, I don't know if you can move NDSU even out of the 2 spot, despite the fact they would lose in the head-to-head. I know you have to be out of the room, which is another question I want to get to after. But when I throw that at, let's just say it's Team A and Team B, how would you reconcile that?
Well, you look at, again, you really are looking at, you look at South Dakota State, right? South Dakota State loses to NDSU, what's it, 5 or 6 weeks ago now, and they've held pretty strong at the 3 seed. The one thing as a committee we have to, you do look at how a team finishes. If you have a team that loses their last 3 and is really, losing momentum, that's one thing. But to lose the last game, again, you still have to look at the overall resume. And if you take NDSU in particular, NDSU has right now the most top 25 wins in the bracket, has all of the metrics are in favor of NDSU. But we saw the same thing. UC Davis played a close game against Montana State and really didn't fall, maybe fell a spot or 2. Yep. And again, because I think you look at their strength, you look at their whole, that's their first FCS loss, so you start looking at some of those things. Again, it's hard to say just one situation because you don't know what all the other games are doing too. Does South Dakota State meet Missouri State, or does Missouri State upset? So there's a lot of moving parts. So for us to say, hey, how this one game is going to impact it this way, because other things are happening around it that could influence where those teams go.
So when NDSU gets brought up, do you have like a folder and just like mic drop it and say, okay, hey, this is, and then leave the room? Like, how do you I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners have no idea. So how do you handle that?
So basically, well, I should show you my FCS Bible I have here. I actually do, as you can imagine, I do a lot of work and research on this stuff. I watch a lot of games, but basically the way we do it is if your team is under consideration or in conversation before you leave the room, you're able to provide factual information. So you're not in there I'm not on the table saying NDSU, but I'm able to go through and really highlight our resume. And where I think NDSU or anybody that's on the committee can highlight their team and make a case for the team based on factual information. And so the things that I would talk about would be strength of schedule, would be quality wins, would be top 25 win. You go through all of those things. That's how you're able to do it. And that's anybody that's on the committee.
Is it helpless, Matt? Is it a helpless feeling?
Sometimes a little bit. But I also say too, I mean, I think the committee, we spend a lot of time together. We debate a lot of things. And again, even though everybody brings their own information, we're all still trying to build the best bracket. And you look at last year, going in, we didn't have as strong of a case, right? We had lost 3 conference games. Yep. And, so where this year is, so every year is a little bit different, but that's kind of what my job is when I'm talking specifically about NDSU is I'm going to say, here's our resume. Here's how I think it stacks up against other teams that we would be talking about or considering before I leave the room. But I would also use that same criteria when I'm weighing other folks too. So trying to be very consistent with how I apply it and not just be biased to look at different things for NDSU and not the same for other schools.
I assume this may be in the same value of a head-to-head, but how much is a conference championship valued by the committee members?
It depends. Not every conference championship is created
right,
equal.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
When you look at the strength of leagues across the FCS, it's very different. So, to say if you had a conference championship in one league that they should be ranked higher than somebody who maybe came in second or third in another league, it really comes down to saying all the things we've talked about: metrics, strength of schedule, head-to-heads, all quality wins, all of those things. So I don't know if that's something we look at really hard, other than the fact that if they win a conference championship, they're automatically into the bracket.
The fight for the top 2 seeds, this might be as tight as I can remember. I think you'll have more, personally, I think you might spend more time there than you will on teams 23 and 24 to get into the tournament, considering how even the resumes could be of North Dakota State, Montana State, South Dakota State, South Dakota. Is that it? How much do you have to parse that, seeing, okay, because now I look, Montana State's win over New Mexico certainly looks a lot better than it did over Labor Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, those are 2, 3, 4 really, really good teams. And that's always the hardest part, is you're trying to get down, and you really are getting down to splitting hairs when you're looking at all those. And so what I typically do is that we really do, we put them all on the board, put all the metrics, all the criteria. The one thing that we've tried in the last couple of years is how do you value out? Not every non-division 1 game is created equal. Not every FBS game is created equal. If you look at New Mexico, for example, they're behind in the Sagarin ratings to probably the top 8 FCS programs. So how does that value versus over a win against SDSU or USD or Montana or whatever, So those are the things that we really have to look at. But when you look at right now, if you look at the top 5 or 6, really good teams, and not a lot separating any of them. So that's where Saturday is going to be really important. I mean, there's some really, between you look at just the top 4, Montana State has a rivalry game. We have a game against a top 4 opponent. SDSU has a game against a top 25 program on the road. So you look UC Davis plays Sac State. That's a rival. So you look at, there's some really meaningful games in the top half of the rankings right now that could influence what the rest of the bracket looks like and where the seeding comes out.
When I look at a couple things here before I let you go, look, when the top teams, in terms of how they play against other ranked opponents? Like, I'll just say it. Do you despise the term quality loss like I do?
Yeah, I guess at a certain to a certain extent. I mean, I'm a big proponent of putting together and building a really good schedule and non-conference conference schedule. At the end of the day, though, you have to be able to win those games too. You could build a really tough schedule and have a great strength of schedule, but if you don't win those games, so at some level, it comes down to you have to be able to turn some of those into the win column if you're truly looking to differentiate yourself in when it comes to seeding and those things.
Is this your last year on this committee?
This is, yep,
so
last year.
What would you say the biggest thing you've learned or maybe surprised you about your 4-year, 5-year tenure on this?
Well, I guess I shouldn't say it surprised me, but what I would say is just the amount and time that we spend. And I think that people don't realize the amount of time we spend discussing, and this really starts all the way back before the beginning of the season. It's not like we all just roll into Indy this weekend and start talking about teams for the first time. The amount of conversations and discussions and debates and amount of games that we watch throughout the year to really, feel like we're going into Indy. Like I feel going into Indy, I have a really good understanding and feeling about all of the teams, like let's say the 30 teams or 35 teams that are going to be in consideration. I feel like I know them really, really well. Now we'll learn maybe one more data point on Saturday, and I think all the other committee members would say the same thing. And so I would say, again, not a surprise, but something that I think for folks to understand is the amount of time and energy that goes into being on, in particular, the FCS committee is a lot. And, I think we all take it really seriously and want to put together a really good bracket.
I don't know. This is the most grilling interview you're going to get because you have ESPN on Sunday morning, right? You're going to be on the selection show?
I do. Yeah. So we'll say, well, they always have some interesting perspectives. And so although I think there's different talent this year. So we'll see.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Is there? Oh, hopefully they know their game. That's all I'll say.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I hope so too. And I think it is. I think from what I've seen, I think it's a good group that understands FCS football, but we'll see.
I'd be remiss if I haven't had a chance to talk to you on the story that came out a couple weeks ago from Brett McMurphy. I'm
surprised it took this long for you to ask.
Hey, I wanted to talk the FCS stuff because maybe we don't have to talk about this stuff much longer. Where are you at in terms of, okay, this is out there, and then I'm sure you've got your own staff, you got boosters saying, Matt, what's this about? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I answer it the same way I probably answered it before is I think where NDSU has positioned ourselves, we should be sought after by FBS conferences. But that doesn't mean it depending on where it is, that it makes sense for us. But I've told you all along, we want to play at the highest level of football we possibly can. And if that means we're at FCS for the next 30 years, then that's where we are. If there's opportunities that make sense for us, then so that's what I tell our staff too. Like we want to position ourselves, and I think we've done a really good job of that. From a success, from a investment, from the facilities, like we've done all of those things to position ourselves to have opportunities and hopefully at least we have an opportunity to say yes or no.
Do you have a timeline in your own mind to say if something were to come, we need to know by blank?
Not really. I mean, because we've been having these conversations for the last probably 4 years, right? I mean, now again, this is a little different where we've specifically been pointed out as talking to somebody, but I mean, these are conversations and we've seen this movement for the last 4 or 5 years. So to say that there's a deadline or a drop dead date that makes sense, I don't really know if there is one. Again, timing it all depends on the situation surrounding it more than anything else.
Financially, a football-only move, does that concern you at all?
No.
Is that something that you would say that this is something that's tenable? We could do this.
Mm-hmm.
The aspect of the house settlement being out there, does that cloud what they wanted? I don't know if you're plugged into what they want to do, but we've talked about the house settlement, you and I, for about 18 months now. and that we still don't have resolution. Does that cloud anything on potential movement because they don't know what the settlement is yet?
I think outside of maybe your Power Four conferences who are moving forward with things, and I think a lot of your other Group of Five mid-major conferences are trying to figure it out a little bit. But that's certainly something. If we're having those conversations in the Summit League, we're having those conversations in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and I would imagine if there was an opportunity for another league, those would be some of the things that you'd want to know. I think everybody's trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
But college athletics is going to move forward, right? And so I don't think that's going to stop things for anybody, but figuring that out is going to be really important for schools.
Was that about as explosive your phone got a couple weeks ago when that story got out?
Yeah, I mentioned you. We have a monthly staff meeting. I probably shouldn't tell. It's the first Wednesday of every month at 8:30, and all of a sudden around 9 or 9:15, my starts blowing up, and I'm up in front of our staff and talking about whatever we're talking about in the staff meeting. And I'm like, man, what the heck is going on? And then sure enough, I saw it afterwards. So, I'll give you a shout out. I think my first text was from Dom Izzo. So congratulations, Dom.
Hey, we've been doing this. I've been asking you for about 8 years now, man. So I figured, hey, if we got something actually happening, you told me, hey, first interview, going to be right here. So I appreciate the time, and thank you for your forwardness on that. Safe travels to Indy, and we'll talk when you get back, okay?
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dom.
Matt Larsen, NDSU Athletic Director and FCS Playoff Chair. He's heading to Indianapolis tomorrow, and, of course, the selection show is on Sunday morning at 11:30. I already got a text in. Listen to your interview with Matt Larsen. God save us that Jay Walker is no longer on the FCS selection show. Jay loves a certain section of FCS football, but I know that for many that watch, especially that are Bison fans, that it's been especially painful have Jay on. I personally, as someone who follows the division, I just want to see someone who's informed about it. That's all you want when you have somebody speaking, doing anything in front of a microphone. You want someone that's informed speaking about it. And that's all I hope. Keep my fingers crossed that we've got that coming up on Sunday morning. We're overdue for a break. We'll get caught up here. Got a big second hour. Travis Lamar will join us from Central Cast to give us the lowdown on the Squirrels moving to AA football. Wrap up hour one of Hot Mike. Getting ready for the volleyball tournament starting in about 3 hours. Back after this.